All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome here. Glad everybody can join us. On behalf of Peterborough and the Kawarthas Chamber of Commerce, I just want to welcome everybody here tonight. And I'll be your moderator. I'm Joel Wiebe. I'm the Government Relations Coordinator here with the Peterborough and the Kawarthas Chamber of Commerce. And before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we are on here at the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 77 in Lakefield, near the shores of Lake Ketchiwanuka, is the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe, which is made up of Curve Lake First Nation, Alderville First Nation, Hiawatha First Nation, and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. I want to thank all of our candidates here who have joined us tonight, everyone watching online, and our partners here at the Legion for hosting us. And a big shout out to our partners from the Peterborough and District Construction Association, Peterborough Downtown Business Improvement Area, and YourTV for supporting this event. So we're live right now on YouTube. This is being recorded as well, so we'll put it back up on YouTube. We'll put it up on our Facebook. I'm sure some of our partners and supporters will share it. And definitely on YourTV, they're going to be rebroadcasting this as well, so check out that schedule. Our debate tonight is scheduled to run till 8, and we'll do our best to get through all the questions. We've had quite a few questions submitted. Some of those we had to combine that are on similar themes, so you may not hear exactly what you submitted read verbatim. But the questions tonight come from the community, local businesses, our partners, the chamber team, and so there's lots of questions to get through. We'll take a short break probably around 7. It's going to be a bit of a long evening, so people can get a little bit of fresh air, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. So if you're watching online tonight, it's a perfect time to go grab some popcorn for round 2. I'll go over a bit of the rules for tonight here. So seating has been, seating and speaking order has been determined by draw. So we'll start with Robert from the Green Party and make our way down, and then the next time we'll start with Tom and so on. And so everyone will have 2 minutes off the start for your opening remarks, and then 2 minutes at the end for your closing remarks. Answers to the questions will be 1 minute. And so we've got our timekeeper, Olivia, over here, and she'll show you the yellow card when you're about 15 seconds to the end of your time, and the red one when you're at the end of your time. At that point, we'll ask that you wrap up whatever you're saying so we can keep things moving along. Now, there is an opportunity for rebuttals. So if somebody makes a statement that's directed at a particular candidate, their platform, their party, you have 30 seconds after people have given their answers. Everyone has gone through, had their 1 minute answers. You can get my attention and have your 30-second rebuttal. If we need more rebuttals than one, that comes down to my discretion, and it's all in the interest of moving the discussion ahead. So if we're having a good conversation with it, absolutely, we'll keep it going, but otherwise we'll sort of cut it off there and move on to the next question. So, having said that, let's get this debate started. So, we'll start with opening statements, and Robert.
I live with autism, and am fortunate enough to have graduated from Trent University in the environmental field due to supports I had throughout my education. This education shaped who I am today. Since moving to Peterborough 5 years ago, I've come to love the volunteer community and close access to nature. For several years, I hosted a radio show about environmental issues and have gained an understanding of the wide scope of these issues. The Peterborough-Kawartha you want is one that builds a strong economy which addresses climate change and the needs of both people and the environment. That's the Peterborough-Kawartha I want. And in order for that to happen, we need leadership. The leadership we need is the kind of leadership Mike Schreiner shows every time he stands to speak in the legislature. I stand with him on building a more caring society, connected communities, and a new climate economy. I agree with the Peterborough Chamber of Commerce that more needs to be done regarding climate change. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Tom.
My name is Tom Morazzo, and I'm a retired military engineering officer with 25 years experience. I have lived in 12 different cities and 3 provinces in the last 24 years. In my career as an engineer, I have managed units up to 300 staff, as well as unionized civilians, with an annual operating budget of $50 million to maintain $1 billion worth of federal government infrastructure. I have provincial level experience working for the commander of the Army for the province of Ontario, where I was part of the commander's assessment team for domestic emergencies. As an engineer, I was also a project director for all new construction projects up to $5 million throughout the entire province of Ontario on all military bases. I have extensive experience in budgeting, project management, and leadership. In terms of education, I have 3 post-secondary diplomas and degrees, including a master's degree in business administration. Until last September, I was a professor at Georgian College in Barrie because my spouse's career took us to the Barrie area, as she too was a military officer posted to CFB Borden. In September, I was fired from my teaching position for refusing to take the COVID-19 injection. I am running in this election with the Ontario Party because I cannot sit by and allow the uniparty coalition of NDP, Liberals, and PCs rip this province apart. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jen.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. My name is Jen Deck, she, her, and I'm your Ontario NDP candidate. Thank you, Joel, for that lovely land acknowledgement. We are all treaty people. I feel so lucky to live in Peterborough. My ties to this community go back 30 years, and I'm proud and glad that my children were able to live, learn, and grow here. Families in Peterborough-Kawartha are suffering these days. On Friday, I spoke to a woman on the doorstep who works full-time with a good-paying job, and her spouse and she cannot make ends meet. She was brought to tears describing how hard life has become for her and her family. The pandemic has revealed the deficiencies of underfunded public services. I'm a teacher, and I've seen firsthand how students are suffering from this lack of investment in the education system. This didn't start 2 years ago, but the COVID pandemic exacerbated shortfalls of the education funding formula. Our students are paying the price now, and our communities will feel it in the future.
Sorry, we'll just take a minute here. Yeah, we're just going to sort out. We've got a technical issue.
Check, check.
All right. You can start over if you like.
What will be better for
Whatever
you
you're
guys?
comfortable with.
You were doing
Yeah,
This is not
sorry
live?
about this, but
This is not live?
You were doing great.
Okay. I'll start again.
okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. My name is Jen Deck, she, her, and I'm your Ontario NDP candidate. Thank you, Joel, for that lovely land acknowledgement. We are all treaty people. I feel so lucky to live in Peterborough. My ties to this community go back 30 years, and I'm proud and glad that my children were able to learn and grow here. Families in Peterborough-Kawartha are suffering these days. On Friday, I spoke to a woman on the doorstep who works full-time with a good-paying job, and she and her spouse cannot make ends meet. She was brought to tears, describing how hard life has become for she and her family. The pandemic has revealed the deficiencies of underfunded public services. I'm a teacher, and I've seen firsthand how students are suffering from this lack of investment in the education system. This didn't start 2 years ago, but the pandemic exacerbated the shortfalls of the education funding formula. Our students are paying the price now, and our communities will feel it in the future. We're waiting months to see a doctor if we're lucky enough to have one. Owning a home has become a distant dream for most, especially for young people, and everyday costs of living, gas, hydro, childcare are skyrocketing. Hope starts with electing Andrea Horvath and the NDP. With your vote, we can elect a government that puts people at the heart of every decision it makes. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Thanks, Jen. Greg.
Thank you, Joel. My name is Greg Dempsey, he, him. I'm the Ontario Liberal Party candidate for Peterborough-Kawartha. I'm so grateful to be here on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations. I'm here tonight because we deserve a better, more caring provincial government. I believe we deserve an MPP who can build positive relationships in our community and then go to Queen's Park to fight for us. I'm here because I have the skills and the heart to be that MPP. My roots in Peterborough are deep. I grew up just off my grandmother's farm in Otonabee. I attended Edmondson Heights and Adam Scott. I was raised by two teachers, my mom's in the audience here, who taught me the value of public service and public education. From there, I built my career bringing people together, and I've served our country in Afghanistan, at the United Nations, and right here at home. I returned to Peterborough because this is where my family is. This is where my heart is. It's where I needed to be as the pandemic was raging all around us. We know that Peterborough-Kawartha is an incredible place to live, but our community is struggling. The cost of living has skyrocketed, housing is unaffordable, and people are hurting. Last election, Doug Ford's Conservatives promised lower deficits, lower gas prices, lower housing costs, and buck a beer. But they didn't get any of that done. Instead, we got 4 years of cuts and chaos in our healthcare and education systems, big box stores open while small businesses were shuttered, and a government that was more interested in putting stickers on gas pumps than delivering results that our community needed. We deserve a provincial government that's going to address the big challenges of our times. We deserve a healthcare system that works for us. We deserve an education system that isn't suffering through $1.3 billion in cuts. We deserve a better, more caring provincial government. I'm looking forward to tonight.
Thanks, Greg. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Smith, and I have been your MPP for the last 4 years. Let's take a look back at what Ontario was like 4 years ago before I was elected. We had 15 years of a Liberal government. Our hydro rates had gone from the lowest in North America to the highest in North America. 300,000 manufacturing jobs had left this province. More than 600 schools were closed, and only 611 long-term care beds were built, while the population over the age of 70 increased by 120,000. Even Kathleen Wynne said to Maclean's magazine that the Liberals intentionally underfunded healthcare. Now, even during a pandemic, we've changed all of that. More than 500,000 jobs have returned to Ontario. We have manufacturing that we didn't have previously. GM has come back to Oshawa to make electric vehicles. Stellaris, formerly Chrysler, has opened or is building a plant for electric vehicle batteries in Windsor, something that we never saw before. We have added more than 30,000 long-term care beds. They are either built now or in the process of being built. And we've hired, and we're looking to hire 28,000 nurses, doctors, and PSWs. We're making a focus on skilled trades to fill those labor gaps, because there are gaps in the system. We know that by 2025, 1 in 5 jobs in Ontario will be in skilled trades. All of this has been done during a pandemic. When you look at what has happened, we have gotten it done. And if we're reelected, we'll continue to get it done. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for your opening remarks. Let's get started with the first question. So, one of the big topics these days is housing. Housing in all forms is becoming increasingly inaccessible. The average house price in Peterborough is $864,000. Our rental vacancy rate is among the lowest in Ontario at 1%. This impacts the quality of life for many, adds difficulty for growing families, and makes it difficult for businesses to recruit talent. What is your plan to make housing in our community available, and affordable. Robert, you're up first.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm mixing up my order already. Tom,
I get the first one.
yes, you do.
All right. There's a very, very specific reason why housing is actually unaffordable here. And it has a lot to do with foreign investment. And if you look at the rising housing prices in the GTA alone, it is driving up the rest of Ontario's ability for ordinary, citizens of Ontario to be able to afford to get into a first mortgage. We're seeing a lot of first-time home buyers now having to live with their parents into their 30s. And this is an extremely complicated subject. There's not one single lever from an economic point of view that you can pull on to make this actually, get solved overnight. It's been happening for a long time. And one of the things that we would like to do with the Ontario Party is to cut back on foreign investment. 15% is not enough. 25% may not be enough as well. But the foreign investment is killing the housing market in this country and in this province. I got the red flag. Sorry.
We're all going to be working on that 1 minute, but appreciate that. Jen.
Thank you. Housing is one of the topics that's come up so often in the short time that I have been canvassing, and that and the cost of living has just risen and risen. Interest rate, the cost of items is rising, but the wages are not. And so to address housing, as Tom said, we do have to approach it in a multifaceted way. The NDP is committed to wraparound protections. We are committed to raising the minimum wage to $20 by 2026. We are committed to providing free dental care, mental health, and pharmacare as part of OHIP. Those costs, which currently are an additional burden on the people of Peterborough-Kawartha, by removing those, they will free up. Oh, my apologies, my time is up. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Greg.
Thank you. Housing in Peterborough-Kawartha is completely unaffordable. In the last year that we've been running this campaign, we've spoken to councillors and leaders all across the riding of Peterborough-Kawartha, and everybody from Havelock to Trent Lakes to downtown Peterborough has said that housing is completely unaffordable. Doug Ford's Conservatives are on their 4th housing plan in 4 years. Their latest one plans to pave over more of the Greenbelt and more of our farmlands. We need a better plan for affordable housing where people want to live, a new Ontario Housing Corporation that is going to actually get back in the business of building housing. And we need to support first-time home buyers, seniors, students, and others on fixed incomes. Housing is one of the most critical issues that we're facing, and I can't wait to talk about our fully costed plan to build more homes.
Thanks, Greg. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. And this is actually something that has come up a number of times over the last number of years. And let's face facts. It's supply and demand driven, and there has not been the supply of housing in not only our community, but all communities across Ontario. We know that the population of Ontario is going to increase by 1.5 million people over the next 5 to 7 years. That means that we need to get shovels in the ground. What we're seeing for the development of a subdivision, it was taking 8 to 12 years to get a shovel in the ground, and that is ridiculous. We have reduced the amount of red tape to make that happen. And in fact, we have now put service level agreements in for municipalities to make sure that they get those building permits out as quickly as possible, because at the end of the day, if we're not building more houses, we're raising the price of those existing ones. And that's what we're doing right now. Under our plan, we had more than 100,000 new homes start in the last year. That's more than we've had in Ontario since 1990. Our plan is starting to work. We're going to continue with it, and we're going to get it done.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Robert.
Thank you for the question. Liberals and Conservatives have not enforced density targets. And what is referred to as red tape is often an important part of the process. Many times, Indigenous nations have not been consulted. This occurred in Kawartha Downs. The Green Party will stop the sprawl so families don't have to have soul-crushing commutes. We will expand infill by allowing triplexes and quadplexes, and we will build 60,000 homes with full wraparound services as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our next question, and this one comes from Peterborough District Construction Association. Two of the biggest problems in construction right now are recruiting skilled workers and an aging workforce. The average age for a construction worker is 55 years old, and we will have a wave of retirements by the end of the decade. Welders, framers, and finishers are among the top skilled workers that will be leaving the workforce. There have been problems for years in getting young people interested in careers in the trades. What strategies, programs, or changes to programs would your government employ to enact or help overcome the stigma surrounding construction and get young people who are in grades 11 or 12 right now to rethink what they're doing with their futures? Jen, you're up first.
Thank you for that question. My son is a framer, and he loves his job. He and his partner have moved to Halifax, where they can afford to buy a home. So thank you for that. There are so many ways that we need to improve living conditions in Ontario and in Peterborough-Kawartha. And it's interesting that when we talk about skilled trades and getting kids to pursue them in education, we come back to we need to have an education system that is funded. We need to have programs that are available in all of our high schools. It's very hard to get into programs in high schools right now because funding is tight, and when you get into those classes, there are too many kids in them. You don't get the individual attention that you need. So we need to address education. We also need to deal with the fact that many of our students, especially after the last 2 years, are suffering from mental health concerns. They need supports. We need to find ways to put money back into education so that our children can pursue whatever it is that they want to pursue. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Greg.
Thank you. Having a job in the skilled trades is an amazing job, but too many students are falling behind, whether it's because of the COVID pandemic or because our school system just doesn't offer the supports and encouragement for students to get into the skilled trades. We see this with the plan to stream students in grades 9 and 10. I'm proud that we're promising to get rid of streaming so that every student can have the same quality public education that they deserve. But we also need to get into the business in high schools and afterwards of both encouraging students, young people, and everyone in our community about what a great job it is to get into the trades. Our plan talks about building 1.5 million homes in Ontario. We need enthusiastic, amazing young people to get into the trades to help us build those homes. And I'm really proud of our plan that's going to make sure that every student and every young person that wants a great career in the trades can have one.
Thanks, Greg. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. That's a fantastic question. What we know is that by 2025, 1 in 5 jobs in Ontario will be in the skilled trades. We know that the education system for the last 40 years has devalued anything to do that wasn't going to university. So we have made significant changes in that. And those who want a good career-based job, skilled trades are the way to go because you're getting paid while you're apprenticing. Imagine that, actually earning while you're learning. And on top of that, we've expanded the programs for it. So if you decide that you want to go into a skilled trade, there's up to $28,000 available to you in grants to get that skilled trade. If you're going back to school, if you already have had a career and you want to go back again, you have an opportunity for up to $500 per week for living expenses while you train for that brand new career. Because we know skilled trades are almost recession-proof. And the more people who are in it, the better it is for Ontario. We're also recruiting foreign-trained skilled trade workers because we have such a shortage.
Thanks, Dave. Robert, you're up.
Thank you for the question. Well, the Green Party will offer a year of free college tuition and guaranteed work for 60,000 young people throughout the province of Ontario. We will also have home inspections and for 40% of homes by 2030 and more by 2030 and 2040. And we will also provide incentives for businesses to transition to a green economy. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Tom?
Well, I agree with some of the other panelists. This really does come down to the education system overall and some fundamental flaws with it. In the fact that we have been driving students, even at the high school level, towards the high-tech industry as opposed to the lower-tech trades industry. And so even myself, as a teacher in a college, it was very difficult to see a balance between students transition from software or high-tech or engineering to try to get them into the trades. The other issue is they're competing with a lot of foreign students. Like, I had classes that were entirely filled by foreign students, making it very difficult for domestic students to do this. Third thing is, we subsidize our students to 50%. And how are we supposed to pay for, unfortunately, plans to give free tuitions across Ontario when our debt provincially is already staggering? So this is a multifaceted problem, and it's not going to be taken care of overnight. Thank you.
All right, on to the next question, and this comes from partners at the Peterborough Downtown Business Improvement Area. Peterborough, and in particular the downtown, is experiencing a host of serious challenges due to the ever-increasing housing, addiction, mental health, and homelessness crisis. What are your strategies to support the small businesses who are experiencing the negative residual impacts of these issues, while also helping those individuals who are experiencing homelessness and addiction issues? Greg, you're up first.
Yeah, thank you. We need a partner who's going to work hard to make our downtown the amazing place that it can be. And small business owners are on the front lines. I know that almost 90% of small business owners have felt unsafe in front of their own businesses in our downtown. That needs to change. We need a plan that will deal with this issue with dignity, both for those who have lived experience and also for the small business owners who are struggling. I'm proud of our plan that will offer a 2-year tax holiday for every small business that's been affected by the COVID pandemic. I'm also proud of support for those who have that lived experience in our downtown. We had a proposal for a supervised consumption and treatment site that's been sitting for 2 years. The funding is still not there, even though it's been announced. I will be the partner that will get that done.
Thanks, Greg. Dave?
Thanks, Joel. The consumption treatment site has been approved, and the transfer payment agreement is in the hands of those who are working with it to make sure that it is ready to go, because the opioid crisis is not just a single crisis. It's an addiction crisis that we have in our community. We have also funded Right to Heal, a program with Red Path, with Peggy Shaughnessy, to help those individuals who may have fallen through the cracks as well in different places. We have added $500,000 to mobile detox with Forecast to make sure that those who are ready to be detoxed, those who are ready to beat that addiction, have the supports that they need for it. And on top of that, $1 million annually to the CMHA for a mobile mental health and addictions unit, 2 of them actually, that'll be servicing all around Peterborough, Northumberland, and Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, to make sure that those who need that service have it where they need it, when they need it.
Thanks, Dave. Robert?
Thank you for the question. Housing is key, and solving the opioid crisis will help small businesses and large businesses in the downtown. The Green Party of Ontario would adopt a housing strategy in which we act quickly to provide housing for those suffering from drug addiction. Decriminalize drug use, because drugs are a health issue and not a criminal justice issue. We will build 60,000 permanent supportive housing spaces with wraparound mental health and other supports, and increase the number of consumption and treatment sites throughout Ontario, as well as work with people experiencing drug addiction.
Thanks. Tom?
Well, I'm encouraged to hear amongst the others as well that there's no appetite to treat this as a criminal activity. It is, in fact, a mental health crisis that we're exacerbating through the use of drugs and addiction. But if we actually look honestly at the last 2 years, all of these things have been drastically exacerbated by some of the Ford policies across Ontario. The amount of depression and mental health issues, the amount of domestic abuse, these are all contributing factors to an underlining overall depression in this province because of the things that the Ford government has done to the people of Ontario. And I have lived in, as I said, many cities, and I still have friends in every city or large cities in Ontario, and they're telling me the same thing. The downtown cores across this province are not what they used to be when I lived there. This is happening across the province. It's not exclusive to just one specific city. All of our cities are in crisis. Thank you.
Thanks. Jen?
The Canadian Federation of Independent Business reports that small businesses have an average COVID-related debt of $190,000, with years of repayment in the future. We also know that small businesses are Ontario's biggest job creator, and 98% of Ontario businesses are small, meaning fewer than 100 employees. So investment in small businesses will result in improvements throughout Peterborough-Kawartha. Some of the commitments that the NDP will enact if put in government, we would like to introduce a $1,000 rebate for local tourism so that to encourage consumers to visit local small businesses. We also commit to raising the minimum wage to $20. And it's a common trope that raising the minimum wage will be bad for business, but in fact, the truth is that workers who are paid more tend to be better trained, they tend to be more loyal to their employers,
All right.
and they are safer.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We've been at time for a little bit. I didn't want to cut you off. You're on a good run.
I
but
apologize, I didn't see the card. Thank
That's
you.
all right. That's all right.
Joel, could I have a rebuttal?
Sure.
Okay. We know that a consumption treatment and services site is not the entire answer for what's ailing our downtown core. But it's been more than 3 years that funding has not come. It required Dr. Pigott to go to City Council and County Council, essentially begging for the money. My question is for our MPP. Why did it take nearly 3 years for that funding to come through?
Dave?
Thanks, Joel. Actually, the application had not been submitted for that length of time, and we came very close to having an application earlier, but they decided not to work together as that original party. So when the application did come in, it came in about 8 months after, or 8 months before it was actually approved. And unfortunately, Dr. Pigott took it upon himself to make it a public fiasco. The funding was in place, ready to be announced prior to Dr. Pigott going to the city and to the county for it. He knew that. I don't know why he decided that he was going to do what he did.
All right. Thank you.
I'd
Jen?
also like to
Sure.
rebut.
Yep.
My fellow panelist also mentioned that some announcements of funding, and I would just point out that the budget that was released recently forecasts a cut of $2.7 billion to healthcare, long-term care, home care, and education. Additionally, ODSP, an announcement was made just a couple of days ago that the Conservative government will increase ODSP, and yet that was not in the budget.
All right. I'm going to give our incumbent here another rebuttal, and then we'll try and move on.
Thanks, Joel. It's really interesting that the NDP brings up the one-time COVID funding that we no longer need to purchase. For example, the ventilation systems that have been put in schools, it would be irresponsible of us to spend an additional $900 million to replace those that had already been replaced. All of the funding that she is talking about is the one-time COVID capital expenditures that we do not have to put back in again because we just did that.
All right. Well, we're getting some good discussion going. We're going to shift gears here a little bit. So, high-speed internet access is essential. It impacts many parts of life and business. Our region is seeing unprecedented growth, especially in the county, though slow to no internet issues are not just for remote rural areas. What will you do to ensure Peterborough and the Kawarthas is a priority both for public and private sector internet investments? Dave, you're up first.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate that. And if you take a look back at the announcements from the past year and a half, the Universal Broadband Initiative, that was a joint initiative between the Government of Canada and the Province of Ontario, has filled in some of those gaps. And the ICON, the Internet Connectivity of Ontario network, we have announced approximately $1 billion for that as well. And you'll see high-speed internet going across the entire province. 357,000 homes will be affected by this by the end of this summer, and the other 700,000 homes will receive it by the end of 2025. Locally, there is a program going in place right now. Construction is ongoing in Burley Falls to service that part of this riding as well.
All right, thank you. Robert.
Thank you for the question. The pandemic has demonstrated that high-speed internet is an essential service. The full platform of the Green Party has not been released, but it will be released this week. But I support efforts to increase high-speed internet.
Thank you. Tom.
I think it's pretty clear in this day and age that to not be able to access internet remotely or in the outskirts of our communities is completely unacceptable given today's working climate. And I think we need to be somewhat cautious about our use of 5G technology. I've been studying this issue for quite some time, and I don't believe that the science is clear on that particular issue. But we do need to continue to study things like Starlink and other alternative forms of internet out to our rural environments or our rural communities, because we are transitioning to an economy where we are working from home, and internet service is an absolute must-to-have. Sorry, my time is up.
You got 15 seconds.
I got 15 seconds. So I think it does really, the cost of this is a monumental cost to push this out there. So I think it does warrant a lot more study in terms of a very comprehensive plan. We need it, but it is extremely expensive in terms of infrastructure.
Thank you very much. All right, Jen.
High-speed internet is an essential service. When the shutdown happened and children were learning from home, we teachers were devastated to see the inequity of the experience, because our kids that come from rural places could not connect and get the education, and more importantly, the community and the support of their classrooms. So this may happen again, and we need to be prepared. The Ford government has made a number of announcements about broadband and high-speed internet, and yet has only spent to this date 0.02% of those promised funds. So they've had 4 years to do this, and so I'm not sure why we haven't seen more progress yet. So the NDP is committed to extending this essential service to rural areas.
Thank you. Greg.
Every single corner of our riding deserves access to reliable, high-speed internet. It is an absolutely essential service, and I agree with Robert and Jen when they talk about that. I've spoken to municipal councillors in Trent Lakes and in North Kawartha, and it is one of the #1 issues that they talk about every single time. In fact, we live 1 street away from the city of Peterborough, and we do not have internet that is strong enough reliably to get on a Zoom call. This is completely unacceptable. We need to invest in high-speed internet for every single corner of the riding, especially the rural areas, because exactly like Jen said, during this COVID pandemic, people are working from home. People need and deserve that service. It's going to be a boon for the economy of our riding, and that's something that I'm going to absolutely make sure that we spend that money and invest those funds.
Thanks. Tom, you'd
Just
like to rebuttal?
just a quick, somewhat rebuttal to that. While I do agree in principle that investment needs to happen in high-speed internet, but I believe it's the customers that should be funding this demand within the communities. I think there should be some subsidization from the government to set the conditions for that, but I don't think the taxpayers should be footing the entire bill for something like this. I think it's a public good, obviously. I think it is essential. But we have to also share this cost with the ISPs, Internet
thank you.
Service Providers.
Yeah, Jen.
We have just come through 2 years of pandemic. People are hurting. People have been shattered by this experience. Now is not the time to be talking about penny pinching. We need to support the people of Peterborough-Kawartha, and we need to help them recover from the pandemic. Thank you.
All right, Greg.
Thanks. I just want to say that I disagree with Tom. 150 years ago, we did not ask the companies to invest in the electrical wires that heat our homes and keep us connected. And high-speed internet has become exactly that kind of essential service, and I do believe it is the government's job to be investing in this.
All right, Dave?
Thanks, Joel. And I'm going to agree that high-speed internet is something that we absolutely have to have. And that is why we are investing billions of dollars to make sure that we have the information superhighway available to every place in Ontario. Because the reality is, if you're not in e-business, you're going to be out of business. And how great would it be to be sitting on your dock here in the Peterborough-Kawarthas and enjoying connectivity to the entire world? Great place to live, great place to work. We need high-speed internet all across here, and that's why we're getting it done.
All right, thanks.
I'm sorry, can I, one more?
All right.
Very short.
Sure.
With all due respect, it's not about sitting on your dock. We have people who cannot afford their food that need to work remotely, and they cannot afford to, they can't do it because they don't have internet. So, you know, I'd love to sit on a dock. I don't have one, but I'm concerned for the people who don't have basic internet so that they can just do basic living.
All right. All right, last one, and then we're going to move on to the next question because I think we're just going to start going in circles.
So,
here,
so to clarify, our internet service providers have had a really good run. And I think that their profit margins have been exceptional. We have unbelievably high internet costs in this province and in this country as it stands. And while I agree, internet is vital to our economy and it's vital to the way we do work, it's vital to the way we live. But at the same time, maybe a little bit less profit to the small number of internet service providers, and maybe they start to foot the bill a lot more for the infrastructure that has to go in, and thereby maybe even keeping the prices of internet service providers to a minimum or maybe a little bit less. Let the profits from the services Ontarians have given pay for a lot of this stuff.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for that. Some good discussion. This next question comes from the community. There are several thousand children on wait lists for licensed childcare in our region. Only a select few registered early childhood educators in our community will benefit from the proposed $18 an hour starting wage. Even at that, $18 is not considered a living wage in our community anymore and is well short of what full-day kindergarten counterparts make. Many childcare centers are struggling to find staff now, let alone enough to provide the 86,000 spaces our province plans to add. What is your strategy to strengthen the workforce, adequately pay ECEs, and create the thousands of childcare spaces our families need? Robert, you're up.
Yes, thank you for the question. Childcare is essential in the economy. And in order to support the economy, we do need to increase wages for ECEs because they have gone through training to become certified. And it wouldn't be fair to underpay for those services. And no one would want to have work for undervalued. And I'm not sure what the Green Platform says about childcare.
Thanks. Tom.
So this is a very difficult issue because a lot of families are caught in this same sort of a trap. Myself, my daughter, 6 years old, she was in daycare up until 2 years ago. And it was costing me in the GTA at the time about $1,200 a month. That's basically a university tuition for a child who's in preschool. And I know that the Ford plan at some point was looking at subsidizing to the tune of, I think, $10 a day or $10 per child, as opposed to $50 a day that it was costing families. That's great, except that that cost, again, is going to get passed on to the taxpayers. It's going to be very difficult for the taxpayers to assume the debt that they're going to have to take on to subsidize the $40 an hour for the daycare. And it is extremely difficult. I actually had to take on a second part-time job just to cover my half of the daycare cost. It's very difficult. And so this is not something that we can, again, it's one of the many issues that we've been facing for the last, I don't know how many years, for the Ford government and the previous Liberal government. But this is a problem that has gone on, and it has not been solved, and it needs obvious attention.
All right, thank you. Jen.
That 30 seconds is a killer.
It is, I agree. Yes, childcare. My children, my oldest son was born 27 years ago, and I remember childcare at the time was $42 a day, which was crippling. And it's just continued to go up. We know that women earn $71 for every dollar that men earn. That's much worse if you are Black or 2S LGBTQ or Indigenous. Women have disproportionately borne the impacts of the pandemic. 10 times more women lost their jobs than men. Women are more likely to be working on the front lines in healthcare and service jobs and childcare, and they shouldered most of the childcare during the shutdown. We need to invest in childcare, and the NDP is committed to $10 a day childcare.
Thank you. Greg.
Jen's absolutely right. I'm so proud of our federal government and the country as a whole for implementing $10 a day childcare. It is going to be a game changer for economic growth. It's a matter of gender equality. It's a matter of fairness, and it's a matter of treating our children right. But Joel, you're right that it is very hard to get the skilled workers into childcare, and that's because Ontario is 6 months to a year behind all of the other provinces. We took that much longer to sign a childcare deal with the federal government. We were the last province to sign that deal, and that put us months and months behind the work that we need to do to train early childhood educators and get started on delivering $10 a day childcare. I'm proud of our plan that will refund parents thousands of dollars for the delays caused by the Ford Conservatives, and our party is absolutely committed to getting $10 a day childcare done as soon as possible.
Thanks. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate that. It's interesting listening to the opposition parties talk about this because they would have had us sign the very first deal that was put in front of us. We negotiated a far better deal for Ontario than any other province. It's a 6-year deal, not a 5-year deal like all the other provinces negotiated. And we got $3.2 billion more. By Christmas of this year, the average childcare price will be 50% lower than it was at Christmas last year. And we will hit that target of $10 a day per child, childcare, by 2025. And we'll go on beyond that, the only province to have made the deal to go more than 5 years. We signed the best deal for Ontario, not the first deal, the one that the opposition parties wanted.
Can I have a rebuttal, Joel?
Jen had her hand up first, so I'm going to go Jen and then Greg.
Again, I'll point out that the Conservatives have been in power for 4 years, and so I wish that these changes would have been made 4 years ago. I'll also point out that Bill 124, which the Ford government passed, capped wages in public sector worker sectors, predominantly those that are worked by women, so nurses, teachers, and education workers. So my concern is that the time they've already had a chance to do this job and they haven't got it done.
All right, thanks. Greg.
So while the Ford Conservatives were busy playing politics with our federal government, families in Peterborough-Kawartha continued to pay skyrocketing high childcare fees. It cost every single family on childcare thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars with the delay, and that was completely unacceptable. I'm glad that we have a good childcare deal now. I'm very thankful for the federal government for that, but it should have been done months and months ago.
All right, so I'm going to give our incumbent here a chance to speak, and then we're going to go on to the next question.
I'll take no lessons from the Liberals, who saw childcare costs go up 400% in the 15 years that they were in power, and 40% greater than any other province in Ontario. We signed the best deal for Ontario, one that was a year longer than every other province, and we got $3.2 billion more as a result of it. That is relief for Ontario families.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your answers. So we're going to move on to the next question. We've touched on this one through a few things, but I feel like it's just such a big pressing issue at the moment when we're talking about cost of living that we're going to address a little more directly. So life is becoming more unaffordable, from food to fuel to housing to buying a car. Despite the private sector hiking wages across the board, inflation is taking our lives and our economy for a ride. The Bank of Canada is in the midst of a series of substantial interest rate hikes. What will you do as our member of provincial parliament to make life more affordable? Tom, you're up.
There's no way I'm going to answer that in 30 seconds. But I'll
You've got a
give it
minute
shot,
on this
okay?
one. So
I got a minute
minute
for
on
this
the
one?
questions, 30 on the rebuttals. Yeah.
Okay, this problem is an incredibly, from an economics point of view, incredibly complicated and difficult problem to solve. But one thing that we really need to start actually looking at closely is stopping all of this obsessive borrowing of money from institutional traders and New York City bond traders. We need to actually start using the Bank of Canada for which it was originally intended for. We had virtually no inflation in this country up until 1974. Virtually none. But today, we're somewhere around $1.2 billion federally in debt in this country. And a lot of it has come just in the last 2 years. Our province right now is in debt for $395 billion. That's the most we've ever been in Ontario history. Until we actually get our borrowing under control and stop borrowing from the institutions and maybe start borrowing from our own Bank of Canada, we can start to get a handle on a lot of the inflationary pressures that families are feeling every day.
Thank you very much. Jen.
Every time. The cost of living has risen extraordinarily. People are suffering because of it. We need to raise the minimum wage, and when we see minimum wages increase, we see all wages increase. When lower income earners get a raise, that money goes straight back into the local economy in the form of restaurant visits, haircuts, movie cinema tickets, and all those purchases that workers have been putting off because they can't pay the bills. That money that is spent improves our businesses, that's more taxes going into our economy, and that's more money to reinvest into the people. I would also like to say that the NDP is committed to free pharmacare and free mental health supports and free dental care Ford led the opposition to a national pharmacare program. The Liberals had 15 years to introduce pharmacare, and they only introduced a limited form right before they were voted out of office. The NDP will deliver.
Thank you.
Hi, Joel.
Greg?
I think we need a provincial government that's going to be tackling these big challenges. And affordability is maybe the biggest issue that are facing the families in Peterborough-Kawartha. You mentioned food, you mentioned fuel, and you mentioned housing. So on food, we're going to be taking the tax off of all prepared meals under $20, which is going to save you money when you go get a coffee, when you go to the grocery store to get a rotisserie chicken. Every family is going to benefit from those cost savings. On fuel, we're going to make transit $1 a ride everywhere across the riding, which is going to save people in Peterborough hundreds of dollars a month and allow people not to take their cars. We're also going to invest $9,500 in subsidies so that people can buy an electric car and not have to spend $2 a gallon on gas. And on housing, we're going to reinstate rent control, and we're going to build the affordable housing that our community needs, which is going to drive down prices. We need and deserve these results for our community.
Thanks so much. Dave?
Thanks, Joel. The approach that the Conservative government will take is one that means that money belongs in your pocket, not in the government's pocket. And we have started down that path already with the LIFT tax credit, with CARE. Anyone who is making $50,000 a year or less in Ontario will not pay a single dime in provincial income tax. No tax at all for anyone making $50,000 or less. On top of that, we've refunded the license stickers for the renewal. $120 a year for every person who owns a car in Ontario for every year moving forward. By contrast, when Stephen Del Duca was the transportation minister, he increased it from $80 a year to $120 a year. This is real money in the pockets of the people of Ontario, and it's going to make a real difference for them. We're lowering the cost of gas by 5.7 cents per litre starting July 1st. All of these things are things that make a real difference for people.
Thank you. Robert?
Yes, thank you. What the Green government will do is invest in basic income. We will double the ODSP, which no other party has promised, and get rid of the legislative poverty for people that have disabilities. We will have targeted support for hydro instead of the blanket hydro rebates that we have now. And we have to get the fossil fuels out of our wallets.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Jen, you had your hand up first. We're going to go and do a few rebuttals here. So you're up first.
Not everybody owns a car. It's a privilege to own a car. And that $120 that every driver will save meant $1 billion that the government no longer has to spend on social services. And that's not just a one-year $100 billion loss, that's every year going forward because that program has been canceled.
Thank you. I've got Greg, and then I've got Tom.
So I believe that everybody deserves to save money. It's why I'm so excited about $1 a ride province-wide. It's going to save people hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but also that $1 billion that was sent out right before the election by the Ford Conservatives is almost exactly the $1.3 billion that was cut from the education budget. People of Ontario and the people of Peterborough-Kawartha deserve a government that's going to invest in the services we need.
All right. Tom?
Okay, just a couple of comments.
Yes.
We raised minimum wage drastically a few years ago, and look where we are. We're not anywhere better off than we were when it was raised to the last time, like $14. It went from 10 to 14. We're no better off than we were when that happened. The other issue is I'm surprised to hear that the Ford government is waiting until July to make that rebate. And that to me seems like a bait and switch campaign promise from the Ford government. The other thing is this: it is not a privilege to own a car in a rural environment when you depend on a vehicle for your livelihood. It might be so in an urban setting where there's good transit, but it's not a privilege to own a vehicle when you live out in the middle of the country. Thank you.
All right, Robert?
My leader has indicated that the NDP supported the license plate rebates in the legislature.
All right, and then I think we're going to have one more here from our incumbent. We're going to move to a break.
I think I can.
Okay,
I should rebut that.
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to go to Dave, Jen, and then we're going to take a little break here.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate that. So let's take a look at the rebate itself, the $120. That was money that you paid, and you're being given it back. It's been called a $1 billion revenue loss. Government revenue is money that came from you. We don't make any money. We take it from you. And in terms of the gas tax, the reason that it's July 1st is the gas tax is paid at the time of being brought into Ontario as raw oil. Once all of that oil has come through the system, all the gas that has been made from it and the tax that was paid originally on it at the manufacturer level comes through, then the tax comes off. There's no way to take it off once it has already been paid.
All right, thanks, Dave. Jen, we'll see what Jen has to say, and then, all right.
Decide which rebuttal it is.
All right.
Okay, so I will be honest, Robert. I'm a teacher, and so teaching's the thing I know. So I guess I'll have to get back to you on that, the statement that you made. But I will also agree that the NDP does believe that people deserve a break. They've had a tough 2 years. I'll also agree with Tom that owning a vehicle is not necessarily a privilege, but let's look at who's actually getting the big rebates. It's people who own multiple vehicles that are getting the big tax breaks. So the one person who has an old car for getting to work, they got $120. But if you own a bunch of vehicles, you got a lot more.
All
That
right.
doesn't seem like equity to me.
You good? All right. So we're gonna break for. Okay.
All right, I'll be
Last
quick.
one.
I'll be quick.
All right.
So the $120, yes, I got 2 years worth of back pay on the sticker, okay? Which is great, except that it's $1 billion that could have easily gone towards paying some other public function, or it could have gone towards paying down the debt. Now, the Ontario budget right now proposes that we're going to take in, taxpayers are gonna fund, I think it's $147 billion in revenue, but then they're gonna borrow $13 billion more on top of that. Why don't you just take the $1 billion and just, instead of borrowing 13, borrow 12? Because that's debt now to us.
All right. Well, thanks for the great discussion. I know our candidates here have so much to say, and it's tough to fit it into that minute and 30-second rebuttal. I'm just going to point out everyone here, I believe, has a website. They've got lots of information, and as you've seen, they're ready to talk. So whether you get a hold of them or their campaign teams, if you've got more questions, look them up. And I'm sure they will be more than happy to answer those. So it's 7 o'clock right now. We're scheduled to go till 8. It's a long night. We're going to take 5 minutes so everybody can sort of catch a breath. And for those watching online, we'll be back shortly. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for everybody who's joining us online tonight and watching this later. We got another hour ahead of us of local issues to talk about. So the next question that we've got is coming again from the Peterborough and District Construction Association. Ontario's Construction Act that modernized the former Construction Lien Act provides provisions for prompt payment and adjudication, came into force in July 2018. It was the result of two private members' bills, an 18-month comprehensive review that engaged all stakeholders, followed by the government bill that passed third reading unanimously. Through experience working under this new statute, a number of bugs or glitches have become apparent that Legislative Council, in drafting the statute, could not have foreseen. All stakeholders to the statute, including general contractors, trade contractors, and the construction bar, have identified the same list of glitches and support a review of the statute to address and correct them. If elected, would you support a review of the Construction Act? First up, we have Jen. Very, very specific question that we're starting off with.
Woo. Do you know, I am a teacher, and 3 weeks ago, I was planning an annual meeting and getting ready to, hoping to get my teachers through the last few weeks of school. So when it comes to that act, I will have to defer.
Fair enough.
I will certainly learn about it, though.
All right. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I think we need more affordable housing in Peterborough-Kawartha. That need is absolutely clear. We're going to need the construction trades. We're going to need all partners around the table to be working together to build that affordable housing. I will absolutely be open to looking into the Construction Act and making the changes that are needed, because Peterborough-Kawartha deserves a local leader who's going to be able to work with everybody, certainly with the construction industry, also with stakeholders, with the municipality, with the township. Everybody needs to be consulted, and yes, absolutely, I am open to feedback from every single stakeholder, because that's what's going to deliver real results for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thanks. Dave?
Thanks, Joel. One of the great things about our government in the last term is that Steve Clark was the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and he has introduced so far 4 bills specifically for housing in Ontario. He has done a fantastic job of working with all of the stakeholders on it, and we'll continue to make sure that we're working with all of those stakeholders, because housing is key to everyone in this province. We have a problem with housing being unaffordable. We've started to address that, and that's because we've had those open conversations with all of the stakeholders, and we'll continue doing that.
Thanks. Robert?
Yeah, did you say 2018?
So it was, I'll go back. It came into force in July 2018.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I support reviewing the act if it improves duplexes, triplexes, energy efficiency, climate change. I haven't had the opportunity to read the act itself, but that is something that I will do before commenting further. And
Thanks. Nope.
Yeah, I do have a rebuttal after.
All right. Tom, you're next.
I have to agree with Jen and Robert. That is an incredibly specific act, a very specific question to one industry, and I'm not fully aware, so I'm not going to try to waffle my way through something I'm not fully apprised on. So I'm going to take a pass on the answer to that, because I'm not informed on it.
No, fair enough.
Okay.
All right, back to Robert.
Okay. Dave Smith mentioned that he had consultations with all stakeholders. But municipal zoning orders take away the ability for public to provide input into development. First Nations have complained about the lack of consultation before being implemented, and experts have also been not able to. So how can you say that all stakeholders are consulted?
All right, thanks. Dave?
Thanks, Joe. Let's talk about minister zoning orders. Every single minister zoning order that has been issued on non-provincially owned land has been at the request of the municipality. And it was the municipality's responsibility to ensure that they did all of the consultation that they were supposed to. And in fact, one of the MZOs was actually reversed after we found out that they had not done all the consultation. So the consultation is supposed to be done. We're asking the municipalities to do the consultation because they're the ones who are requesting it.
All right, thanks. All right, moving on to the next question. The last couple of years have had a devastating impact on our local business community. Some businesses have been able to bounce back, but others will take years to rebound from crushing debt, a decimated customer base, loss of vital staff from extended closures, trouble accessing capital, and getting new talent. What will you do to ensure our hardest hit businesses aren't left behind in our recovery? Greg?
Thanks, Joel. This is an incredibly important issue. I've spoken to dozens of local business owners who have indeed been so affected by the pandemic. When we think of the height of COVID, when big box stores were wide open and our small businesses in downtown Peterborough and in Havelock, in Apsley, were all shuttered by this government, those businesses deserve better. It's why I'm so proud of our plan to give small businesses that have been impacted by COVID, just the ones you were talking about, Joel, a 2-year tax holiday for all of their expenses because we know how much COVID has cost them. We know how much the chaotic response of this government to COVID has cost those small businesses, and they deserve better.
Thanks. Dave?
Thanks, Joel. A number of the things that we implemented during the COVID crisis are things that will continue on and make it easier for businesses to operate. It's like the Main Street Business Program, where anyone who wasn't online had the opportunity to come online and sell their products that way. This is something that will be a long-term effect for these businesses. We also made changes to the electrical system. Let's face facts. Hydro costs went from the lowest in North America to the highest in North America under 15 years of Liberal government. We've adjusted that. We canceled the bad contracts for renewable energy that were guaranteed if we had let them open. Hydro would have gone up by an additional 23%. Businesses would have been crushed under that. We were able to hold that down. And that will continue on because it's real relief for those businesses right now.
Thanks. Robert?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We know from experience in Peterborough that tackling the climate crisis and the pandemic crisis will help businesses succeed. The pandemic isn't over, and it's important to learn the lessons from past pandemics and to better prepare for future pandemics. And we know that a lot of businesses downtown have flooded. And in addition to that, a basic income will also help support small businesses so that people can enjoy where they work. They won't have to be forced into bad jobs.
All right, thanks. Tom?
Again, I agree with Greg. This is an incredibly difficult and complex issue. But had the Ford government actually listened to its Emergency Management Ontario and looked at the contingency plan for pandemics, there would have never been lockdowns. There would have never been masks. We would not have put our businesses, local businesses and big businesses, into the tailspin of fear that we have over this pandemic. We have forced small businesses to make extravagant expenses in terms of restaurants, putting up plexiglass and shields and all this protective equipment, yet many of the businesses were never refunded for the costs that they had to put out, and then they were shut down anyway, and all of the lockdowns that should have never been happened. There was never a cost-benefit analysis in this province to look at the economic harm that would cost or happen to Ontario. The Doug Ford government went ahead and did it, and it has had devastating consequences, and it will be devastating for years to come.
All right, thanks. Jen?
The long, painful shutdown was the result of poor pandemic planning by the Ford government. The 1,600 nurses that were laid off certainly did not help that. Small businesses are the biggest job creator, and they account for 35% of net new jobs in Ontario. So certainly, we do need to support small business. I've lost my train of thought, and so I'm just going to catch it in a second. In addition to rebates for small businesses, we also want the minimum wage to be raised so that the workers can be adequately compensated. My sister-in-law is a small business owner, and when the shutdown happened, she had to struggle to figure out how to move online. It's not easy enough. They weren't able to leap into online, and meanwhile, they were not receiving any income because the big box stores were open and they were shut.
All right, so on rebuttals, I've got Greg and then I've got Dave.
I'm not surprised that our MPP is fighting the battles of the past, because small businesses in Peterborough-Kawartha were devastatingly impacted by the COVID pandemic. Big box stores were wide open while small businesses were shut. We lost more days of school than any other jurisdiction. We need a plan for the future that is going to support small business, and that's why I'm so proud of our 2-year tax holiday plan.
Thanks. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. I'd like to point out that the emergency measures that we took, the Reopening Ontario Act, was voted on unanimously. All parties agreed with it. And if you take a look at our record from it, in Ontario, we have about 15 million people. In the first wave, we had just over 2,000 people die. In New York, they did not take those measures. They have about 19 million people, and they had 35,000 die. In Quebec, they did not take the same measures in the first wave, and they had close to 5,000 people die. If I have made a mistake, my mistake has been trying to keep people alive during COVID.
All right, thanks. Tom?
We had SARS-1. We have Emergency Measures Management Ontario. Prior to COVID, the second, or SARS-2, there was in 2014 an Ebola outbreak in Ottawa. The the WHO, in their contingency planning for pandemics, explicitly references masking and lockdowns. And I would dispute the actual fatalities because those numbers are completely unclear across both the federal and the provincial's reporting systems. And
Sorry.
my time is up?
We've been at time for a little bit there.
Okay, all right, I'll let it go.
You're starting a new thought, so I just... Yeah, all right. We're going to move on to the next question, which still, it's a little bit of a shift, but we're still talking about some healthcare stuff here. So we've been saying for a long time that aging at home has significant benefits in terms of health outcomes and cost savings. COVID added further strain to our healthcare for seniors. Home Care Ontario polled Ontarians 55 and older and found 96% plan to stay in their homes or apartment as long as possible. But aging at home is expensive. For private care, from private care to home renovations, much of which currently is paid for out of pocket. What investments does the province need to make to ensure seniors can age at home affordably? Dave, you're first.
Thanks, Joel. Let's start off with the tax credit that we have for seniors to stay at home. Up to $10,000 in expenses, you can receive a tax break for it, for things like putting a bar in your shower so that you can have a shower and steady yourself when you're in there. When we look at what we've done with long-term care, with home care in particular, just over $1 billion is being invested in home care because, as you said, aging at home is more comfortable than it is going into long-term care. On the long-term care side, in the previous 10 years of the Liberal government, 611 beds is all that was added. But the population went up by 120,000 for those over the age of 70. Instead, what we've done is we've invested $4.2 billion to build an additional 30,000 long-term care beds. They have already started or they're in the process of being started because that's what our seniors deserve.
Thanks. Robert.
Thank you for the question. I know that housing has to be part of the solution. and anywhere that seniors stay at home. And that means increasing support for people to do so. And increasing ODSP, the Green Party will double ODSP and is the only party that will do so. And this will allow a lot of seniors to live at home with dignity. Thank you.
Thanks. Tom?
So we have our long-term care facilities are actual train wreck in the vast majority of them. There's some are phenomenal, some are deplorable. And that's not just inside the riding, it's across the province itself. And families the families that I've spoken to have lost complete confidence. The depression for our seniors, the very fact that we've known that the baby boomers were going to get to retirement age roughly within the next, starting now in the decade, it's unconscionable that we don't have an actual comprehensive plan of dignity and respect for our seniors in the last years of their lives. Families are terrified to put their families or their loved ones into long-term care facilities. And so they're having to keep them at home. And with the inflationary costs that we're suffering right now, that is becoming even more challenging. You've got kids that are in daycare with seniors in the same household right now. And at $1.92 a liter for fuel, things are getting passed on to the consumers. How are families supposed to deal with this? And they've had lots of time. They've seen this coming. And yet, long-term care facilities are an abysmal mess in this province.
All right, thanks. Jen?
Seniors deserve to age with dignity, and they should not be worrying about where they can live and the cost of living. It's lovely that some seniors are able to live at home. That is something that is a privilege to them. Many, many seniors do not have that luxury, and they must stay in long-term care facilities. Bill 124 capped wages below the rate of inflation for healthcare workers and PSWs who are predominantly racialized women. Ford refused to give them a permanent raise or make their jobs permanent. You may recall during the pandemic that one of the issues in long-term care was that part-time workers were going from facility to facility. By the way, so were occasional teachers. And so we need to stop giving contracts to dirty for-profit businesses to run long-term care. It should be part of our social safety net.
Thanks. Greg?
Thanks, Joel. I hope that people were listening very carefully to our MPP's answer to that question, because he was focused on beds and not focused on the seniors that you rightly said wanted to stay in their homes, and not focused on those nurses and PSWs that are working so hard to care for our seniors. You know, our for-profit care system in this province got so bad that we had to call in the Canadian Army to fix it. Seniors want to stay in their homes, and I am proud of our bold plan to help keep 400,000 seniors in their homes. We will make sure that nurses and PSWs who care for those seniors are well paid at $25 an hour, a real living wage. And we're going to end for-profit care in this province because our seniors deserve it. We deserve a better long-term care system that will be supportive in our communities, that will keep seniors in our homes, and I'm so excited to be driving that change.
All right, thanks. We've got a rebuttal from our MPP.
Thanks, Joel. I'll take no lessons from the Liberals, who built 611 long-term care beds over the course of 10 years when the population over the age of 70 increased by 120,000 people. Their average amount of care was 2 hours and 54 minutes per individual. We're increasing that to 4 hours per individual at long-term care. We've given a $3 permanent raise to PSWs and a $5,000 retention bonus for nurses. We're getting it done.
All right, we've got Robert and then Greg.
Thank you. The long-term care crisis is not new. It has been those reports going back 30 years of abuses in long-term care. So my question for Greg is, how will your government, if elected, be different this time?
All right, Greg.
Great, thank you. I'm really proud of our plan to end for-profit long-term care. Our seniors deserve better. No party has a perfect record on long-term care, but what we need to do is to have a complete change in how we're treating our seniors. We need to take them out of institutions, keep them in their homes where they want to be, and build long-term care centers that are in the community, that are places that people actually want to live. And I'm so proud of this plan that's going to drive transformational change for our seniors in this province.
All right, we've had a few things directed at Dave, so I'll give you a chance to rebut this.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate that. I think we have to go back to Kathleen Wynn's comment in Maclean's magazine, where she said that the Liberals intentionally underfunded healthcare. That's not the record that they should be talking about. That's not the record that they should be trying to live on. That's not what we have been doing.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next question here. So this one comes in from the community. Ontario students have suffered the longest pandemic-related learning disruption in North America. What is your party's plan to address the learning gaps and ensure students have the supports they need? Robert, you're up first.
Thank you for the question. The number one thing is solving the pandemic crisis. And when I was in hazardous waste, the first thing was containment before doing anything else. And that will help students. And in terms of education, providing support for mental health is a key priority of the Greens. 10% of the health budget will go directly to mental health. Thank you.
Thanks. Tom.
So many of my students, when I was teaching, were suffering badly from mental health and the lack of human contact with their fellow students. And this province, the Ford government, made a massive mistake in thinking or believing that they could get to COVID zero. Instead of actually learning how to live with it and have some measure of safety with a normal functioning society, where we were not isolating our students going into, phenomenal years within their life, starting college, starting university. But it starts even before then. The number of families that I've talked to, that their young children right now are being told in the classrooms that they are not boys and they are not girls. So this radical identity agenda must stop in the schools. It's ridiculous. It does a lot of psychological harm. I know of one school that had 7 children come out of the same classroom because of the mental harms in these identity, gender identity issues that are being pushed on the children as young as 7 years old.
All right, we're at time here.
All right. Sorry.
Jen.
It's absolutely true that students are suffering, children are suffering. Excuse me. And so mental health absolutely is number one, priority number one. Including mental health as part of OHIP will allow children to access the mental health services that they require to come back from the last 2 years. The NDP is also committed to capping class sizes from kindergarten through grade 8. Currently, kindergarten classes can be up in the 30s with a teacher and an ECE. The NDP is committed to a cap of 20 students in kindergarten with an ECE. We are also committed to hiring more education workers. Anyone who's been in a school or has kids that have special needs knows that kids are getting short shrift. Only kids with self-regulation issues that are violent can get the supports that because they are so limited, school boards are stretched thin and they need more support. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Greg?
Thank you so much. So I also suffered through many weeks of classes lost when I was going through high school. That was caused by the chaos and cuts of the Mike Harris Conservatives. And now our students are going through the same thing, having lost more days of school than any other jurisdiction in Canada. Our students deserve better. They deserve smaller classes. Our plan is going to cap class sizes at 20 students across the board for elementary and secondary and hire 10,000 new teachers to staff those classes. Students deserve more options. I'm so excited about the proposal to offer an optional grade 13 for students. I was not ready to go to university at age 17. I'm so glad I got to do OIC. It won't be for everybody, but it will give those students the option they deserve. And they deserve more investment. And we're going to cancel the wasteful 413 highway that's going to cause immense carbon pollution in our province. And we're going to invest every single cent saved from that highway into our schools to provide the education that our students deserve.
Thanks. Dave?
Thanks, Joel. Let's remember that under the Liberals, over 600 schools were closed. We've been building new schools. We've been adding on to schools. And on the mental health side, we are the first government in Ontario to have a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. $400 million has been allocated to the Ministry of Education specifically for mental health supports for students, because we know that during COVID-19 there have been significant challenges for those students. This is real support for them. We're getting it done.
Thanks. All right, I've got Tom, then Robert.
We're talking about mental health in the schools, and I don't want anyone to be under the impression that it's the school's responsibility to address the mental health with the student. It has to be a family approach. Those services need to be offered to the parents, because this is now getting critical to the point where it is a family mental health crisis. It's not just the student's mental health crisis. I spoke to some of my students on Zoom that were suicidal, and I was able to get the families involved. And this is a family mental health crisis right now because of the fear-mongering that has gone on over the last 2 years in this pandemic. We need to help the families, not put the responsibility onto the schools to do the heavy lifting for the students.
Thanks so much. Robert?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to rebut a comment that Tom made about gender. Transgender people are real people, and they have been identified in the census, and these people are facing violence, non-binary included, and supporting them is important.
All right, first I got Greg, and then Tom, you can respond to that.
I'm not surprised that our MPP wants to fight the 2018 election, but since the pandemic, parents and teachers and students have suffered. We deserve big transformational change that is going to help our students, and that's why I'm so proud of that plan. And one quick thing for Tom. I've made my career defending the human rights of everybody on behalf of Canada abroad. Human rights are for everyone, no matter their gender identity or sexual orientation, and I am proud to be running for a party that will always defend the human rights of every single person.
All right, thanks. Tom?
So let me clarify my position for both. I do not want my 6-year-old daughter going to her senior kindergarten class and being told she's not a female. That is not the place for kindergarten teachers or grade 1 teachers telling my daughter that. I will instill my morals, my ethics, my values with my children. That is not the place for a school. So I agree, Greg, I agree. However, when it comes to gender identity, that is a family matter. That is not something that should be indoctrinated into the schools at a young age. My daughter's a daughter. She'll remain that way until she chooses to later in life to make that change.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Ready to move on to the next one? Okay, we're going to talk about energy. Our energy grid is on the verge of crisis. The Pickering Nuclear Generating Station will be retired in 2025, and we're planning to phase out natural gas power in coming years. Demand is expected to outpace supply by the mid-2020s, and Ontario won't be alone in trying to purchase electricity from our neighbors. Our population is growing, and with it, the adoption of electrification as a more sustainable energy source. How do we ensure our people and our businesses have access to affordable and sustainable electricity, both in the short term and long? Sorry, we are at Tom.
I am and always have been a big fan of renewable energy. I don't think that's ever going to change for me. The prices, when I worked in that industry for a short time, part-time, many years ago, were very cost prohibitive. But the prices of solar, and in some cases wind, has drastically come down. And while I don't believe the taxpayers should buy renewable energy equipment or infrastructure for people, I do believe that there could be tax breaks. And that's where the incentive, I believe, needs to be. I don't believe that we should be subsidizing a $9,500 amount of money for somebody to buy a renewable or a electric vehicle. But I do think that we should look at maybe tax incentive or tax breaks. I don't think that the taxpayers should be paying for it, but I do think going forward, our energy consumption is going to grow. As a government, we are responsible for a lot of the infrastructure that is publicly funded, and I think we should continue to reinvest because that infrastructure is aging and it doesn't keep up with demand. And I wouldn't mind taking back some of our electricity from the United States.
All right, Jen.
Climate justice must be a priority. We deserve it now, and we have a responsibility for our children. Is my mic actually on? Yes. Okay, thank you. We can't eliminate fossil fuel power in the short run, but we need to use the time that we have to invest and innovate in renewable energy. That is why the NDP is committed to investing in renewable energy. We will be encouraging the purchase of electric cars by providing rebates. We also need to remember that the components that go into these electric cars are minerals that need to be mined. When we are going up to the ring of fire to do extraction, we need to be mindful of the 9 Indigenous communities, the nations that are up there. They need to have input on how we do resource extraction.
Thank you. Greg.
Our electricity grid is the energy of the future. And we're watching as the Doug Ford Conservatives plan to skyrocket emissions from our electricity sector in natural gas by more than 600% over the coming years. We need and deserve to get to a net zero electricity grid as soon as possible. I'm proud to be running for a party that canceled Ontario's coal-fired power plants, reduced the smog and the pollution that was caused by them. It was the single most impactful thing that any provincial government has done in the history of Canada to reduce our climate emissions. But we need to focus on the challenges of the future, which right now are making sure that we have the renewables and the clean energy that we need to get to a net zero electricity grid as quickly as possible. Our party will invest in that future, making sure that we have clean, affordable, renewable power for everyone who needs it.
All right, Dave.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate that. Ontario has a grid that is 94% greenhouse gas emissions free, and that is because we have a fantastic nuclear program, and we're expanding on that with small modular reactors. The very first one will be built in Durham, and one of the great exciting things about that for this area is that BWXT is part of that process, BWXT in Peterborough. The refurb for Bruce Power was also done in conjunction with BWXT. And one of the things that most people don't know about with our green energy coming from nuclear is that we're also producing medical isotopes. We're one of the few countries in the world that does that. So not only are we making GHG emission-free electricity, we're doing it as well as making medical isotopes that help other people, and we're reducing the cost of electricity in Ontario.
All right, thanks. Robert?
Thank you. We have to support lowering demand. And that's not being done with the current incentives for all the parties. They're subsidizing millionaires to waste electricity at the same time as subsidizing people that need it the most. So those opportunities for that. And Ontario's electricity is getting 400 times more polluted because of canceled renewable contracts. And we have to have confidence in the trading system, and my time is up. So,
Thank you very much. All right, so I've got one more question here, and then we're going to go into closing statements. So your next question, and this one is coming from us here at the Chamber. Tiny homes are a niche that can help some people access affordably priced homes. Peterborough and the Kawarthas Chamber of Commerce recently had a resolution approved by the members of the Ontario Chamber calling on the province to create a tiny home strategy and work with municipalities to incorporate a standard set of guidelines for tiny homes that aligns with the Ontario Building Code. What role do you see tiny homes and secondary suites playing in meeting our housing needs? Jen.
I think any way that we can address poverty is something that needs to be explored. Tiny homes are an interesting aspect of that, and there are some interesting pilots that we should be watching and perhaps emanating or following. My apologies. But bottom line is, when we address poverty, we need to address it in multiple ways. Tiny homes are not going to be the solution to end homelessness. The homeless population, they require mental health supports. They need to have access to doctors. They can't be going to the Emerge because that's the only way that they can get medical support. We need to be making sure that we deal with addiction. So tiny homes are a start. They are certainly not the full solution.
All right, thanks. Greg.
We're suffering through a housing crisis in Peterborough-Kawartha, and I'm so proud of the action that many activists in our community have taken. Peterborough Action for Tiny Homes has done amazing work in our community to promote this form of housing, but I agree with Jen that tiny homes are not the final solution. We need to take care of people with dignity. We need to build housing, the kind of housing that we need that is affordable and that people on fixed incomes, that seniors and students can afford to live in. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of absolutely everyone in our community. It's why I ran my nomination campaign on bringing back the basic income pilot that was canceled by the Doug Ford Conservatives, even though they promised not to cut it. It was because they were afraid that it was working. We need to look for creative solutions to help for housing and support for everyone in our community. And I'm excited to build on important ways for us to create these solutions in the future.
All right, thanks. Dave.
Thanks, Joel. You've actually touched on two very distinct things on it. I'm going to start with the secondary suites. We passed legislation that allowed municipalities to have control on that, and the municipalities have the ability to pass a bylaw now that would allow a secondary suite in any single-family residential home across the entire province. Peterborough has not taken us up on that yet. That would be one of the ways that we'd start to address some of the housing challenges that we have in the city of Peterborough. With respect to tiny homes, I think that there is a consensus across the board that this is an innovative new way of doing it, and we need to make sure that we're taking a look at different pilot projects that are across all of North America so that we get it right. Because we want to be in a position where if we go down that path of building those tiny homes, They are 100% safe, and we don't find ourselves in a position where somebody, unfortunately, passes away because of cutting corners when you're building that. We have to get it right the first time, and that's why we're looking at what's happening in other jurisdictions.
All right, thanks. Robert?
Thank you. A landowner in the city of Peterborough has offered property to develop tiny homes. And I agree with the other candidates that it's not going to be one size fits all. But it is supported by the unhoused community. And tiny homes will play a significant role in the housing strategy.
Thanks. Tom?
So it's taken me, almost my adult working life to be able to even afford a little piece of land. And I was talking to a general contractor. I cannot actually build a 1,000 square foot home for under $400,000 without a garage. The cost of living is so prohibitive that people under duress and under stress are starting to turn to tiny homes, not because they aspired their whole lives to live in a tiny home, but because they can't afford to get a normal home that they grew up with their parents. So I've spoken to general contractors that now are starting to reevaluate their business model because of the demand that people are going to have for tiny homes. And I believe that there is far too much regulation. There is too much municipal bylaws in the way. And I'm happy to hear Greg say that they're cutting back on it. We need to make it easier for people to have home ownership. And if that's tiny homes, if that's the way to go, then I'm okay with that. But make no mistake, people are doing it because of the economic pressure that they're under. They're not doing it because they want to live in a shipping container-sized house.
All right, thanks. So that's all the questions for tonight. So you each have 2 minutes. We're going to start with Dave. We're going to do reverse order of how we did our introduction. So you've got 2 minutes. There's no rebuttals on this. This is your final statement, and then I'll wrap things up. Dave, take it away.
Thanks, George. I want to thank the people of Peterborough-Kawartha for giving me the honor 4 years ago of being the MPP for this area. It has been one of the greatest honors that I've had. I have spent the last 33 years in Peterborough, serving the city of Peterborough. I was the president of the Peterborough Community Church Hockey League. I amalgamated it with the Peterborough Minor Hockey Association to reduce the cost for parents so that kids could play hockey. I brought Hockey Day in Canada to Peterborough in 2013. I formed the Under the Lock Hockey Tournament, Canada's only minor hockey sanctioned tournament played on a body of water. I've served on 2 committees for the city. I've been there for this community. I'm a member of the Peterborough Kinsman Club, where our motto is to serve the community's greatest needs. And that's why I decided to put my name forward originally back in 2017 and then get elected in 2018. I will gladly stand on my record because I have been there in this community the entire time during COVID. I was not parachuted in afterwards. I've been here the whole time, serving our community, doing the things that our community needs, giving back to our community, and my job's not done yet. I need 4 more years so that I can get more things done, because I am getting it done.
Thanks. All right, Greg.
Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, the DBIA, the Construction Association, YourTV for hosting this debate. I've served Canada abroad and promoted democracy. I know how important but fragile our democracy is and why elections matter. So thank you for helping to make sure that our community has a chance to hear what all the candidates has to say. And thank you to my fellow candidates, to Jen, to Tom, to Robert, and to Dave. Thank you for being here tonight and participating. And thanks to our audience for tuning in and hearing the different plans from all the candidates. Because on June 2nd, you have a very important choice to make. The choice to fund education, not fund smoggy highways. The choice to make transit, including Peterborough Transit, the Link, and the GO Bus, just $1 a ride, province-wide. The choice to help seniors stay in their homes and end, for once and for all, for-profit long-term care. The choice to support small businesses hit by COVID. And you can choose a government that's going to address the big challenges of our time. You can choose a government that's going to take real action to fight the climate emergency and cut pollution in half. You can choose a healthcare system that works for us with wages for healthcare workers that they deserve and guaranteed access to a family doctor within 24 hours. And you can choose an MPP who has the skills and the experience to build the relationships in our community to go to Queen's Park and to get results for Peterborough-Kawartha. Not Doug Ford's voice in Peterborough, not an NDP voice, not even a Liberal voice, but Peterborough-Kawartha's voice at Queen's Park. That's why I'm running. That's why on June 2nd, I ask for your vote, because we can do it together.
Thanks. Jen?
I want to start by thanking the organizers of this event, you, the residents, for coming out or tuning in, and to my fellow candidates. We've talked a lot tonight about what the people up here on this stage have done or will do to make our community better for us all. I'm confident that everyone on this stage loves Peterborough-Kawartha and truly wants the best for us all. This election is definitely about picking someone who will stand up for our community in Queen's Park and fix what's broken. This election is about choosing the person who will stand by you and help make life more affordable and provide the critical public services you can depend on. Everyday life, from filling up the gas tank to getting a home to raising a family, has become harder and harder. It's no wonder many people have become cynical about politics. Day-to-day costs that students, seniors, families, and small businesses face are out of control. Hydro, childcare, grocery bills are through the roof. Ford promised to make life cheaper, but things have gotten more expensive under him. Worst of all are the cuts we've seen to the public services we rely on. Ford cut billions of dollars from healthcare, long-term care, home care, education, and the environment. He actually spent millions of dollars to rip up already installed charging stations. The Liberals, they cut too. They sold off Hydro One and our bills skyrocketed. They laid off 1,600 nurses. It's how we ended up with hallway medicine. It does not have to be this way. Things can be better. We deserve better. When NDP leader Andrea Horwath is elected premier, she will work for us, and I will work for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Tom?
In the time of Doug Ford, he has failed miserably to meet expectations. He campaigned to the left, but he governed to the right. If you look at his finances, it would make any previous Liberal government giddy. He's going to collect this year $176.7 billion in revenue from the taxpayers of Ontario. It's not enough. He will borrow an additional $13 billion. He has increased his corporate taxes by $7.5 billion, $5.3 billion for personal income taxes, employee health tax, almost $500 million, or actually over $500 million, gas tax, $500 million, land transfer tax, tax. That's really, it's hard to distinguish between the previous Liberal government and the current Conservative government. There's another big issue. The Ontario Party will not whip votes. So that means if you look at Doug Ford's record, he has fired 4 of his sitting MPPs in their constituencies because they dared to disagree with him, with evidence, with doctors, with actual scientifically verifiable research that he presented to the Government of Ontario. And instead of listening, he simply just fired them because they disagreed. His own party. He basically marginalized 5 constituencies. The Ontario Party will not whip votes. In the Ontario Party, I will vote for the constituencies, or the constituents. I will vote for my conscience, and then I will look at what the party wants. And if it is not good for the constituents, that is how I will cast my vote. I will always vote for what the vast majority of the constituents want. Not be afraid to lose my job because I didn't vote for Derek Sloan and what he wanted as a party member. Thank you.
Thanks. Robert?
Yes. Thank you. The economy and the environment don't have to be foes. And that's important to remember because Peterborough businesses experienced damage from a major flood in 2004. And that influenced my politics and my education. Peterborough knows firsthand when the environment isn't taken seriously. We have to act now, and this is why we need to send more Green MPPs to Queen's Park. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone, all of you candidates who came out tonight. And I had this. We didn't even get through half the questions I had on this list. I knew I was being optimistic with that, and if I have that many questions, I'm sure there's much more yet out in the community. So I'm going to say it again. Everyone here, they've got a campaign team. They're ready to chat themselves. They have websites. There's more than enough ways to try and reach out to them, and they are more than happy to answer your questions. If they're for all of them, send it to all of them. There's no way we can get through everything in 2 hours, and I really don't think we can stick it out for 4. So thanks again to the Peterborough Downtown Business Improvement Area, Peterborough and District Construction Association, YourTV, and everyone who stuck it through for 2 hours here tonight, and Royal Canadian Legion Branch 77 for hosting us. So thanks everyone, and have a good night. Thank you.